Welcome back everyone. The iPad mini 6 actually just came out, so let's go ahead and do a comparison against this and its predecessor, the iPad mini 5, that 2019 model. Now here's the thing, okay, I like both of these, I think they're both great. The iPad mini 6 is by far the better one by a long shot. Even though it's not perfect, it is that much of an upgrade that it makes sense for me just to recommend it to people. So without a doubt, if you have an iPad mini 5, going up to that iPad mini 6 is a pretty good upgrade without a doubt, and I do think it's worth the extra money. Now, even if you have an iPad mini like 5, I still think it's still worth it. I still think you can still keep it. The jump is a big jump, but the feature set is still pretty much the same. You have the same type of panel, to be honest. A lot of different things changed with it, but I'd probably still recommend an iPad mini 5 if you can get it for a cheaper price, like a much cheaper price, but the iPad mini 6 is the one that makes the most sense. On the front, the iPad mini 5 had that 7.9-inch panel, and it was a very good panel, had True Tone. It just had a lot of bezel on it, and that design is the same one from 2012 or 2010, whenever Apple made the iPad mini, the first one. It's been exactly the same type of design. The only thing they even kind of changed, to be honest, was Touch ID on the iPad mini 3. Other than that, every single iPad has been the same, and to be honest, that's kind of a problem, because a lot of people have been scammed on eBay and other sources, because somebody would be selling an iPad mini 5, but it'd actually be an iPad mini 3, and people wouldn't know that much. That happened to me, and this probably happened to a lot of other people too if that happened to me. So the iPad mini 6 definitely is the better looking one with that 8.3-inch liquid retina IPS panel, and it's a far better looking panel without a doubt. I mean, this is the cream of the crop. This is one of the best iPads ever, and even now, it was surprisingly one of the first devices with that new 8-chip inside of it, the new Apple A15 Bionic. So I think this is definitely a worthwhile tablet, and even on the front, way less bezel, they removed the home button, they pushed the screen out to the edges, but it's still not bezel-less, I feel like with the iPad mini 5, the bezels on the side were a little bit thinner, but the iPad mini 6 bezels are exactly the same all across, and I do actually like it a lot. I think it feels and looks really good in the hand, and that one also has True Tone, but they both have 60Hz panels, and they both have Touch ID, they both have Touch ID in different places. The iPad mini 6 has one on the power button, where the iPad mini 5 obviously had one on the home button. Now another big change is actually with the charging port. The iPad mini 5 had the lightning port section, so you can go ahead and plug in your lightning cord and move on from there. The iPad mini 6 actually removed that, and they now put a USB Type-C port on it. Is it a big difference? To be honest, it can be, it could be a big difference for you. It can now support a lot of other accessories, and USB-C is the future. So it really only makes sense for Apple to go and do this, because all their other iPads support it except for the iPad, the base one. And on the back, almost the same type of setup, but the iPad mini 6, obviously with that single camera setup, is going to be a better camera setup without a doubt. And honestly, we might as well hit on it. The iPad mini 5 had that single camera setup, that 8 megapixel sensor, but the iPad mini 6 has a 12 megapixel sensor. So that automatically is a pretty big difference. But here's the other massive thing. The iPad mini 5 could only shoot 1080p videos. The iPad mini 6 can now go up to 4K at 60. So that is a very high resolution to film in, especially on an iPad mini 6. And it's still a wide angle lens, where you have that standard lens on the iPad mini 5. But this is what I'll tell you between the two. With the iPad mini 5, that is essentially an iPhone 6 camera, at least on the back. So keep that in mind. The iPhone 6 camera that came out in 2014 is the same one that's pretty much on the back of the iPad mini 5. Whereas on the iPad mini 6, that thing actually has pretty much the same camera as an iPhone XR. So still a little bit outdated, but it's a very, big upgrade coming from the predecessor. You have flash on this thing, which looks really good as well, and overall, it's a very good upgrade. Now on top of this though, it just doesn't stop there. The front cameras also got a little bit of an upgrade as well. The iPad mini 5's front camera was a 7 megapixel sensor. I think something along the lines of an iPhone 7. I think that was probably when they switched up, or maybe the iPhone 6s. Now with the iPad mini 6, that is actually now a 12 megapixel sensor. You can go up to 1080p at 60, so it is almost exactly like the iPhone XR front camera too. But the bigger thing is that this one is an ultra-wide sensor. So the benefit of that is that if you're somebody who wants to go ahead and, be in one of those Zoom calls or, FaceTime calls or whatever, the iPad mini 6 has that capability of that spotlight mode or whatever it is, that it can actually track you if you're moving around. So I think that's a really cool feature as well, and that is without a doubt one of the biggest changes with the iPad mini 6 and the base model iPad iPad also supports it. So that is another massive advantage for this specific iPad. Is that the biggest reason to go from that iPad to this one? Probably not, but I think it's still a really good increase and a really good upgrade. So between the cameras, the iPad mini 6 is definitely the better one, but the mini 5 camera is still really good too for the most part. I mean, for an iPad, depends on how much you're going to use it, to be honest. So that pretty much covers it up there. Now I do want to hit on the longevity of both of these iPads, meaning how much software support they're going to be given. Now with the iPad mini 5, it's already kind of outdated. I mean, it has that Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it, which was the same one as the iPhone XR. It's funny I'm bringing up that phone so much now. So what does that mean? Well, pretty much, that's a 2018 chipset, so it's probably going to get another 2 to 3 years of full OS updates, and then it may get security updates for a little bit, but it really depends. Apple could flip the switch and, give us maybe 2 years of updates and that's it, or they could go and support us for like another 3-4 years. That could be the plan as well. You never know. The iPhone 6s is a case in point of what Apple did with one of those phones, and they did a great job with it. Now with the iPad mini 6, this thing, with that latest Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it, it's going to be supported for a very long time. These things are not going out of date anytime soon, and that is a massive advantage for something like an iPad mini 6. So that one is definitely going to outlast the mini 5. Now between the battery life between them, there's not really a crazy big difference, which is surprising. I would have expected a bigger difference. So with the iPad mini 5, we had that 9.1 watt hour battery, where the iPad mini 6 is a 19.3 watt hour battery. So a little bit of a difference for sure, but I mean, you're definitely going to be getting almost the same type of battery life. On my mini 6, it's been pretty good. It's definitely not like iPad 9 battery, but it's still pretty good for the most part. And the iPad mini 5 was pretty much like that too, so there really wasn't that big of a difference. So in terms of that covers it up there. Now ending it off with the performance, the iPad mini 5, like I mentioned, had that Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM, where the iPad mini 6 has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM. So again, and this is another pretty big differentiating factor between the two. You are going to be getting a much more just performance heavy iPad on the iPad mini 6 than on the iPad mini 5, and that is without a doubt. The Mini 6 is a solid, device. It is one of the only iPads that supports that Apple A15 Bionic, which is that latest and greatest chipset. With the Mini 5, it wasn't a bad performing iPad. I still think it's pretty good, but because it was coming from that, A9 chip or A9X that was on the Mini 4, it was kind of a differentiating factor because they had to go and I guess give it the A12, which was I think one of the latest chipsets at that time. Now Apple did it again with the iPad mini 6 and they gave it the latest chipset, which is amazing. So this is great. It is technically clocked lower than I think even the iPhone 13, which is pretty interesting, but it's still a very good performing iPad. I messed with it. It doesn't really have too many issues beside that jellyfish display issue, which isn't really affecting me too much, but I still think it's a very good iPad. I have very few complaints with it. Now, if you're talking straight performance, both are going to be good performing iPads still, but the Mini 5 just isn't going to compete with the Mini 6. It's just obvious. It's just what happens throughout the lifespan of these type of devices. So without a doubt, you're going to be getting a better performing iPad and a much better performing iPad on the Mini 6 than on the Mini 5 in my opinion. So that pretty much covers it up there. And to answer the question, should you go and buy an iPad Mini 5 or should you go and buy an iPad Mini 6? This is what I'll tell you. I think the iPad Mini 6 is a much better iPad, and it is definitely worth the money going from the Mini 6 to the Mini 5. I don't think the Mini 6 is perfect, and I'm curious to see what the Mini 7 would bring. I'm expecting things like a 120Hz panel, maybe bigger battery, different things like that, maybe even a newer design, which would be pretty hard to beat, but they could shrink these bezels down a little bit more. But even if not, this is still a killer looking iPad, and I have a lot of respect for Apple for doing this. They didn't have to do it, but I guess they did, or maybe they had to do it at some point. The Mini 5 is still a very good iPad for the time being, but sooner than later you may want to jump up to a Mini 6 because it is that much better of a looking iPad, and it really does look really good in the hand, to be honest. So that pretty much covers it. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit the subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.